Hello, this is Dr. Phil Fernandes, the president of the Institute of Biblical Defense, pastor of Trinity Bible Fellowship, and the director of the Master of Arts in Christian Apologetics program for Veritas International University. And today I'd like to talk with you a little bit about giants in the Bible. Giants in the Bible, kind of one of the weirdest topics that's out there, and I'm going to address the issue. We all know about David and Goliath, and according to the scriptures, Goliath was 6 cubits and a span, which would make him between 9'6" and 9'9". Some would argue for another ancient manuscript in the Septuagint, making him only 6 foot something, and that's, you know, if somebody beat up a guy who's 6'8", nobody's going to be talking about it 3,000 years later. So I think Goliath was genuinely a guy who was 9.5 feet tall. And so we're going to look at what was the origin of giants in the Bible. That's Genesis chapter 6. Let me read a passage to you. I just have the New International Version, so I'll be reading from that right here, but I would rather read from the New American Standard or the New King James Version. But the Genesis 6, it says, when men began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God, B'nai Ha-Elohim, the sons of God, saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. The Lord was grieved that he had made man on earth, and his heart was filled with pain. And so the Lord said, I will wipe mankind, whom I have created from the face of the earth, men and animals, and creatures that move along the ground, and birds of the air, for I am grieved that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And so what you have here is the fact that the Bible is describing why things got so wicked before the flood, and it says that the sons of God, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, everywhere else in the Old Testament where that passage is mentioned, it's talking about angels. Now, a lot of scholars don't like that, so they tried to kind of waffle on the issue and try to water it down, but the historic understanding, both by the ancient Jews and the early church, who held the book of Enoch in very high regard, they understood this to be angels of God, high-ranking angels that left the spiritual domain and took on human form, took on bodily form to somehow cohabit with female humans and create a hybrid race of angel humans that were actually giants. Josephus, the Jewish historian who lived in 97 A.D. and wrote a history of the Jews for the Romans, he interpreted this as being angelic beings producing a race of giants by cohabiting with female humans. He even says that this was the real story behind the Greek and the Roman myths. Philo also believed the same thing, and throughout, you read the early commentaries until you get to Augustine, and the idea that the sons of God were the sons of Seth, and they intermarried with the daughters of Cain is just not a view that was held by the ancients, and so it's kind of a watering down of what went on. And this shows how demonic the demonic realm could get. Now it says they were on the earth during the flood, before the flood, and also afterwards. And the only other time Nephilim is mentioned, by the way, in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, they translated the Nephilim with the word where we get the word, the Greek word where we get the word giant from it. So these were definitely giant beings. Also, I think it's angelos tus theos in the Greek, the Septuagint translating the sons of God. They called them the angels of God. Now, when the spies went into the promised land after being delivered, the Jewish spies, by being delivered by God through the parting of the Red Sea and the 10 plagues, being delivered from Egypt, they didn't go into the promised land because of lack of faith. The spies came back with a bad report, and they said this in Numbers 13:33. We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak, so the Anakim, or the Anakites, come from the Nephilim. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. And so these are giants, and the Anakim are from them. The Rephaim became the name for the giants after the flood. And so how did these giants from before the flood carry on over after the flood? There's a big debate about that. King Og of Bashan, he had a bed that was 13 and a half foot long. He was killed by Moses, and while the Jews were wandering through the wilderness, he had a bed that was 13 and a half feet long, and it's mentioned that he's of the Rephaim, he's of the giants. So it's not bragging about how rich he is, it's bragging about how big he is. So this guy could have been a 12-footer. Goliath was 9.5 feet tall. So these giants seem to be, then you got possibly the five sons of Goliath who were killed later on, who weren't quite as big as him. They might have been 8-footers. You have an Egyptian, 7.5 foot tall, killed by one of David's mighty men, Benaiah, and yet he's only called a man of great stature. He's not even called a giant. So apparently there were a race of giants that were demon-human hybrids, and both before and after the flood. Now, how did they survive the flood? Some would say, well, the flood was a local flood, so not everybody died. But that contradicts the scripture, so I reject that. Others would say maybe there was, like Hugh Ross, the old Earth creationist, says that maybe there was a second bombardment of the planet Earth by fallen angels, and that created the next rung of the next group, the next platoon, if you will, of fallen angel, of Nephilim, giants walking the earth, and that they were mainly limited to the promised land, and the Jews were very much the extermination of the promised land was to take out these Nephilim. Others even speculate that maybe one of Noah's sons had a little bit of Nephilim blood in her, and so it's a tough one to call. But whatever the case, there were giants both before the flood and after the flood. Now, these warrior giants of the Bible, these demon-human hybrids, it seems that they were between about 8 foot tall and about 12.5 feet tall from the limited data that we have. And today's warrior giants, by the way, we have people that are over 8 feet tall. Guinness Book of Records recorded a guy over 9 feet tall, but they all had growth hormone diseases and different kinds of diseases that made them weaker than the average human. But these in the Bible, these giants were warrior giants. Today's warrior giants are big athletes, and they go from like 6'6" to 7'6" in the NFL and the NBA. You'll see these tremendous athletes, more athletic than little guys, and these guys are between 6'6" and 7'6". But once you get over 7'6", there's the diseases and things of that sort. So I think what that shows is that the giants of today are just as big as you can get as a human. Like the Egyptian who was 7'6" that Benaiah killed, he was just called a man of great stature. He wasn't called a giant. But the warrior giants of the past were demonic giants and could get much, much larger and much more fierce. And so when David the shepherd boy killed Goliath, it's a lesson for us all that our problems are often bigger than us, but God, our God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is bigger than any promise we will ever face. God bless you.